Hello everyone. In recent time, English is very important for us. How to speak English while you are reading. If you are not aware of it, this video is definitely useful for you. This is Gopi. You are listening me on my YouTube channel, Miss Gopi Classes. Let's begin. Step aside to make room for others, which is written by Janina Jones. Lolly Daskal, a leadership coach, tells us about a world-famous violinist who once said after a successful performance of Beethoven's violin concert, "I have a beautiful score, a lovely violin, and a very good bow. When I put this together, I only need to step aside." This is true not only of great music, but also of most situations and areas in life where leadership is needed. Leaders with mission, purpose, and a great team need to often step aside and watch others take the lead. Most leaders lead from the front, but a time may come when they have to step aside to make room for others. Civilization has been built by us standing on the shoulders of the others who opened the door of opportunity for us. By stepping aside, we are demonstrating our vulnerability as limited human beings who may excel but still have our own vulnerabilities. David Waite, the Anglo-Irish poet, says that the only chance we have as we mature is how we inhibit our vulnerability, how we become larger and more courageous and more compassionate through our intimacy with disappearance. He describes vulnerability as not a weakness or passing dissipation or something we can arrange to do without, but as the underlying, ever present, and abiding undercurrent of our natural state. We cannot run away from our vulnerability. Great leaders are not often the most obvious ones. They often work behind the scenes and help develop others. Kate E. Webb, president of Creative Results Management, says that the great leaders leave space for others to talk, decide, and lead. We have to leave space in discussions by allowing others to express themselves first. In discussions, we encourage others by asking questions rather than making statements. Making space for others also means we leave space in decision making. Once you delegate a decision, don't take it back and don't let the person brings it back to you. As responsibility and decision making go hand in hand. In this way, Webb suggests we leave space for others to lead. Smart leaders don't give people answers to their problems. They help them discover answers for themselves because what you discover is what you own. The most common way of learning is for someone to tell us what to do and how to do it. The more creative way is to learn through discovery. Telling others short circuits the discovery process. On the other hand, when we think hard about a problem, we invest ourselves in the solution, and when we discover a way forward, we own that too. When we do not have all the answers, it encourages us to increase our problem solving skills and increase ownership of insights and increased commitment to actions, says Webb. When we delegate responsibility, we become more grounded and rooted, which enables us to strengthen the root system of the entire society. We do this by developing relations roots, character roots, spiritual roots, mental and health physical roots. When a person steps aside to make room from others, he becomes a builder of a strong root system, which will sustain diversity, flexibility, and create a healthy society with the roots spreading in all directions.
Chapter next, The Speaking Tree.
Universe is not run by God, it's an autopilot, which is written by Hasmukh Adhia. Spirituality is a search for answers to basic questions such as who is Ishwar, God, and what is this Jagat world. Vedanta philosophy has an explanation for this. God is supposed to be the creator, controller, and destroyer of the world. It is a combination of universal consciousness and body. But the body of God, as per Vedanta philosophy, is the entire body of universe called Prakriti, nature. It is the Prakriti on which the consciousness of Brahman shines, which controls the manifested creation in an autopilot mode. Universal consciousness is a non-dual single element which is Sat, always present everywhere. Chit, the cause for making the universe sentient, and Anand, pure bliss. It is therefore referred to as Sat Chit Anand. In Vedanta, it is referred to as Brahman. The same Brahman is known as Atma in the context of an individual. God is not someone running the universe sitting in heaven. It is an autopilot system set in motion with clear cut results coming out of specific actions. For example, if you show a mango seed, mangoes come, and not oranges. It is a perfect rule of Prakriti that includes the law of karma, according to which one gets karmaful, results as per one's karma's deeds. God as Prakriti is difficult to visualize, so we can give the divine names like Ram, Krishna, Allah, and Jesus and worship Him in different forms. Since entire Prakriti is manifestation of God, one can pick up any object of nature and worship it. This explains the worshipping of 330 million gods in Hinduism. By nature, God is nirgun, formless. In fact, God is controlling the world, sitting inside each of us and residing in every part of nature in an individual form. A saint was sleeping in the temple Vedanta with his feet towards the idol. A person scolded him for this fact of effort to God. He replied, "Can you please tell me the direction in which God does not exist? I will keep my legs on that side." The man soon realized his mistake and apologized to the sage. Jagat is a field of experience created by God to help us exhaust our karmas. Jagat is like a fully furnished accommodation along with some inmates for a jiva to enjoy or suffer this karmaful. The world exists of nature, flora, fauna, and all beings. Some people who have good karma enjoy this world, while others suffer. The suffering in the Jagat is not something which God does out arbitrarily. It is a result of our own karma, either of these or past birth. A question arises: if an individual's karmas decide pleasure or pain, what about the natural calamity in which thousands of people suffer? The answer given is that whenever the collective karma of all people in that place fructifies, then such a calamity happens. And karma decides everything in our life. Is there any purpose served by praying to God? The answer is yes. Just as in case of a democratic setup, after the verdict of Supreme Court, the President has power to give reprieve to an offender. Similarly, God can always forgive us even though we might have committed some bad karma. So one can trust God and pray for mercy.
Chapter next. The Speaking Tree.
A jeweled canopy of human solidarity, which is written by Daisuke Ikeda. The world is facing a multitude of sharp challenges, including economic problems and climate change, alarmingly illustrated by increasing extreme weather events. In order to overcome these issues, what kind of vision do we need, and how can we strengthen our solidarity? I recall words shared with me by John Kenneth Galbraith, a leading economist. He had direct experience of a number of global crises and was deeply affected by the precedent wounds he which sent in people's lives. This brought him to continually question not only the economic order but the organization of society itself. When I asked him how we should shape the world of the 21st century, he replied that we should aim to create a century in which people can say, "I enjoy living in this world." We also discussed the Buddhist worldview, expressed by the phrase from the Lotus Sutra. The questioned essence of Mahayana Buddhism: living beings enjoy themselves at ease, that we are born into this life in order to savor joy. People's happiness and dignity do not bloom in the isolation, but they can taste the true joy of life through connections of the heart with which They assist and support one another in times of adversity. The Lotus Sutra vividly depicts with a keen sense of reality the depth of such joy with these analogies, like a fire to one who is cold, finding a ship in which to cross the water, someone in the darkness finding a lamp. There is no one size fits all solution to the diverse spectrum of problems people face. As such, a crucial question we must ask ourselves is how each of us can become that hand of support extended to those facing hardship. How we can strengthen the kind of relationships where we can share in each other's joy at having overcome our respective ordeals. In the Vimalakriti Sutra, there is an impressive scene illustrating the significance of actions individuals can take. 500 youths gathered around Sankhya Muni, each holding their own jeweled parcel to align with the spirit of working for the happiness of all people. At that moment, the individual parcels held by each of the youths joined together, creating a jeweled canopy that covered the entire world. Joy welled up in the hearts of these who saw this magnificent canopy appear. Their respective parcels no longer served just to protect each youth from wind and rain or the burning rays of the sun. Rather, each individual who had traveled their separate path in life rose above their differences in a single shared determination. And it was this that brought this vast protective canopy into being. I see this is a beautiful symbol of the limitless possibilities of human solidarity. I am convinced that passion and strength of the young people will serve as a driving force for creating a century filled with peace and hope. The writer is honorary president of the Shoka Gokkai and founder of the Shoka Schools system.
Chapter next. The Speaking Tree.
Neurology of Compassion and Empathy, which is written by Deepak Renade. The human brain is programmed for and capable of subtlety, nobility, and benevolence. It has a center that bestows a unique and divine attribute to man, a neutral substrate that generates and regulates compassion and empathy. Extensive neuroimaging research has associated activation of a core salience network involved in the processing of affective painful stimuli, comprising two key regions, the anterior insula and anterior cingulate. Activation of this network has been implicated in affecting compassion and empathy. Empathy and compassion are the need of the hour, and the human race perched atop the apex of the evolutionary pyramid can surely use its power of directions to discretion to inoculate and imbibe these virtues. Mechanisms that mediate compassion involves using the sense of self as a reference point to perceive the world and gain information about other people's mental states. However, applying these self-referential projection mechanisms in stimulations where it is inappropriate can result in egocentrically biased judgments. Egocentrism and narcissism have been steadily increasing over the last decades, with some scholars even talking about narcissism epidemic. Egocentrism and narcissism arise out of a false sense of identification of the self, a self that regals in sensory gratification, a self that is utterly hedonistic and in relentless pursuit of power, gratification, and domination. The quest for gratification is boundless and insatiable. Satiety based on extrinsic agents is inherently fluid. Satiety that requires constant stimulation mutates to lust, and evolutionary is doomed. A mouse experiment where an electron was placed in the pleasure center bears the testimony to this. The mouse was placed in a box that had a lever. On pressing the lever, the electrode delivered a microcurrent to its pleasure center. Once the mouse realized that pressing the lever resulted in pleasure, it kept on pressing the lever repeatedly. There is an intrinsic pathway that does not rely on an external stimulation to reach a state of bliss and contentment. Activation of these pathways is what spirituality is all about. Egocentrism and egocentric behavior have the inherent potential to unleash large-scale destruction and devastation if they foster in the psyche of political and religious leaders. Temperance, compassion, empathy, and tolerance are the benchmark of evolution of the human brain. The brain is capable of not just intellectual evolution but more importantly of emotional evolution. There has never been a greater need to effect a paradigm shift. A shift from segregative hegemony of ritualistic religion to a far more holistic and inclusive spiritual harmony. Spirituality that's universal and reversals a pathway to knowledge of the self. Knowledge of the self that transcends the psychological form. Knowledge that liberates from the ego and all egocentrism. Knowledge that will unite mankind to a cohesive collective consciousness and user in an era of peace and bliss. An understanding that all duality and diversity is merely a manifestation of fundamental non-duality. A non-duality that's forever in a state of blissful awareness. The writer is a neurosurgeon and faculty at the World Peace University School of Consciousness Studies.
Chapter next. The Speaking Tree.
Spending your time alone creatively, which is written by Narayani Ganesha. Those who are terrified of being alone without someone next to them or without e-devices and other external aids are perhaps missing out on one of the most creative and delightful opportunities that life has to offer. Most of us hesitate to spend too much time in our own company. We like to surround ourselves with sights and sounds, with people, with audiovisual stimuli, so that we are never alone. Melinda Moyer writes in the New York Times that a study published recently suggests that our tendency to avoid being alone with our thoughts is in part because we tend to underestimate the value of thinking. Kon Muriyama, a psychologist at the University of Tübingen in Germany, and his team asked adults to first predict how much they would like sitting in a quiet room alone, and then actually had them do it for 20 minutes. To their surprise, the participants enjoyed the experience more than they had expected them to. Why people avoid being alone with their thoughts could be because we tend to worry a great deal. We list out all unfinished chores of payments to be made and deadlines to be met at work. Or past mistakes can come back to haunt us and make us feel guilty. But research shows that letting out minds wander and engaging in certain kinds of daydreaming can give us joy, serenity, and can even make us more creative. Daydreaming need not be seen as an escape from reality. What we perceive as reality could itself be someone's dream. According to some schools of philosophy, entire creation and our daily lives could all be part of dream time. According to indigenous people in New Zealand and Australia, once we set aside any prejudice we may have about daydreaming, we will discover the joys hidden in our thoughts that are not necessarily anchored in time frames of past, present, and future. In this cosmic sleep, Vishnu is said to create and sustain the world in his dreams, traversing past, present, and future. According to a researcher, an ideal time to drift off is when you are doing something that doesn't demand much mental attention. Waiting for the bus, gardening, cleaning, showering, taking a walk, or even brushing your teeth. It can be easier to daydream when you are engaged in a mental task than when you are doing nothing at all, says Jonathan Scholar, a psychologist at the University of California who studies human cognition. There is no need to feel guilty of thinking thoughts that are not apparently useful. They may be random thoughts that float in and out, but they may in fact that shape as something quite creative and concrete and could even translate to real life in many useful ways. One could call this mindful daydreaming, wherein you daydream about things that ignite your curiosity and which interest you. Seekers may daydream about existential questions about the mysteries of life and afterlife, without reaching for the phone or iPad, without having to sound out your doubts to another person, and without putting pressure on yourself to find the right answers. That is, let the mind wander free but in positive and happy ways. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please hit the bell icon for my daily updates and subscribe to my channel. See you soon. Bye bye.